Welcome back to another Medtech Snapshot, the one question, one answer digest podcast. With me today is Stephanie Goddard, CEO of Glidewell Labs. Stephanie and I are going to be chatting through some interesting topics today. One, navigating atypical careers and how you transition through that process ultimately to become CEO. We're also going to cover what is the actual life and kind of day in and day out look like for a CEO. So make sure you stay tuned. We also have a surprise question for her. All right, Stephanie, so we're talking about, this idea of being a CEO, and, we had also just kind of dove into your career transition. So where I want to take this discussion now is really talking about what the day in a life of a CEO looks like. Because, if we take your story, for example, you run a medical device organization with roughly 5,000 employees. I often find that from when people are looking from the outside in, they don't truly understand what a CEO does. And, when I had the opportunity with you a couple weeks ago to walk your campus, it really opened my eyes to the amount of activity on just a day-to-day basis that somebody at your level has to operate within. For example, in one day having to go from a finance meeting to an operations meeting to a sales meeting to a regulatory meeting and having to be able to adapt to that. So I'd love for you to share with our listeners, how is it you stay mentally focused going from one meeting to the next like that? And what are some tricks maybe you've learned along the way so that you can be supportive of those departments within your organization without having to feel like you're running them yourself?
I think it's a really good question. It's funny because I remember my son coming into the office with me one day, and we were driving home at the end of the day, and he's like, "Mom, how do you do that?" And I said, "How do I do what?" He's like, "How do you go from a meeting on contracts to a meeting about HR to a lawsuit to a sales meeting? Like, how do you parse your brain like that?" And it's funny because I don't think about it, right? It's just, you do it. But I think when you're running a large organization, you get really good at compartmentalizing. So, and I think in some respects you have to, because if you don't compartmentalize, then you are constantly thinking about the last issue in your next meeting, right? So it's like, I try to, in my meetings, turn my cell phone off, pay attention to the meeting at hand. I will say, as a CEO, Teams and Zoom is sort of the bane of my existence, because it's really, really hard. I have two screens, so it's really hard for me to stay focused on the one screen. Sure. And not sort of go back and look at my emails that keep flying in, the whole time. Like, you can turn off your cell phone, but it's hard to turn off the other screen. I can sort of dim it and minimize things, but the human mind wants to kind of stop paying attention to one thing and pay attention to something else. But I think for me, what I've tried to focus on, like I said before, is hiring really strong people in those different divisions. But it is hard. You saw our facility, we have over 1 million square feet, but with 1 million square feet comes a relatively huge operation and organization, right? So, we've got a mechanical engineering department, we've got a materials R&D division, we've got a regulatory affairs, we've got human resources, we've got dental lab, prosthetic manufacturing. So one person cannot know every detail of every single one. And I think the hardest thing for me in the beginning was learning enough about each of them to ask the right questions without trying to be a micromanager in any one particular area, right? So, but a day in the life of a CEO, I don't know. If somebody has the answer, I'm clearly doing it wrong, because I don't think that there's any one day in the life, because it's I think the day in the life of the CEO is you're constantly pivoting. The economy is doing one thing, like today, you wake up and the federal government shut down. So you're trying to figure out last night, luckily being on West Coast time, it's like, okay, 9:00 at night, what does this mean for our organization? How are we going to be impacted? Is there something that we need to be prepared for tomorrow that's going to significantly impact our operations? So, that's kind of a once in a while type of thing. That hasn't happened since 2019. So like, what did we do in 2019? How did it impact us? To, maybe there's a lawsuit that I have to be deposed for, or maybe this morning I woke up, we actually have a huge warehouse. So this morning I woke up, I had to go to the warehouse because it's like, what is all this stuff that we're storing and why are we storing it? It's how are we going to, manage our inventory? Like, do we write some of it off? Do we sell it? Do we, use it in our labs? Like why, like, and then how did it get to this point? Right. So I can't say that there's any one sort of like magic of like, I wake up every morning and it's like this.
Well, hey, I'll give you some good feedback here. When we walked your campus 2 weeks ago, I was impressed with two things that I saw, one of which I acknowledged to you as we were walking. The first one was how clean everything was.
Yeah.
Every company operates slightly different, but I was so amazed at the cleanliness of not just the campus itself, but the manufacturing area that we walked through. I mean, you just don't see stuff like that. So that to me tells me that not just from an organizational perspective, that a lot of your employees have ownership, and that they look at their space that they're controlling, they're operating, that's theirs. And that's key, because that dives into things like cleanliness, right? And keeping your area functioning well. And but the other thing that I picked up on as we were walking is how many people we interacted with that you knew their name. And it was through the whole organization. I mean, as we were together for that hour or so, you must have said hi or talked to 20 plus people. And that's really impressive, because with an organization of 5,000 people, that's difficult. So from a CEO's perspective, what advice do you have to maybe a CEO that's in the job for the first time, and things that you've learned along the way that maybe are good tips or tricks for them in their own role?
I mean, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. I think, leading with humility is really important. And I think, I've said this before, but pretending you know everything, especially if you come in from outside, I think humility will go a long way with the people who are there. For us at Glidewell, we've got really long tenure here. So a lot of our employees have been here 10, 20, 30 years. And so I know a lot of them. I hired a lot of them when I was the head of HR. But also, I really love interacting with our employees and just saying hi to them and knowing about their families. And I think the more you show that you care about them, the more they have trust in the organization, that you're going to make decisions for them that are the right decisions, even in the hard times, right? So like COVID or, a downturn in the economy, you have to make decisions for an organization, and you want to hope that your employees are going to trust that you're doing the right thing for the greater good, right? Like you might have to lay people off, or you might have to cut some benefits, but at the end of the day, you're doing it to sort of, for the greater good and to save the organization and to do the things that are right by them. But I think for a new CEO, it's all about like being curious, asking lots of questions, and showing humility. I think will go a really long way to building a team that will make you successful. But if you try to be sort of like, a lone wolf, then I think those are the ones that don't do as well.